what I need to know. Step number 4 is this. Calculate the cost. Calculate the cost. We have to go ahead and measure out and think through, do I want to make this decision based on the cost involved? Proverbs 20, verse 25. Again, we're going to hear from Solomon. He says it's a trap for a man or a woman to dedicate something, to make a decision, to commit to something quickly, rashly, and only later to consider his vows. He says, be so careful before you jump into something and commit to something, because here's the deal. You can jump into something far easier than you can get out of it, right? How many times have we made a contract or signed up for something or subscribed to something and we can't unsubscribe it? I subscribed my email, got on an email list for an organization one time, and I wanted to get off of it and unsubscribe from it. You know what I found? There was no unsubscribe button at all. And they were pretty tricky about it. It was really hard to unsubscribe. Because why? It's so much easier to get into things than to get out of things. It's a principle of life that Solomon gives to us. Jesus echoes this in the New Testament in Luke chapter 14, verses 28 to 29, where he says that somebody doesn't just go to battle without counting the cost of what the war is going to cost. They don't build a tower without first counting the cost of what it's going to cost them to build. I just read this article this week. Mohammed Hadid, the dad of Bella and Gigi Hadid, the models. This guy's pretty wealthy, but he also ran into some trouble, legal trouble, this past week, and it was kind of culminating in some things that happened. He decided to go ahead and out in California and LA area, he decided to build a house. And so he got the blueprints, got the architectural plans, and submitted them to the city board, and the plan was to build a 3,000 square foot house. Well, in the midst of doing this project, he decided, you know what, 3,000 square feet isn't enough for my house. So he doubled it. And he went back to the drawing boards, redrew the plans, and had plans for a 6,000 square foot house. But he didn't submit those plans to the city. And so he started building this house, and as he started building this massive mansion that was going to be estimated at some $50 million, he ran out of money. And so as he ran out of money, the local authorities found out, and they took it to court, and the judge says, you have to knock it down. You have to pay some fines, cease and desist, otherwise we're going to put you in jail. And he said, well, I don't like to hear that. I don't want to hear that because I don't have the money to even knock down what I've built so far. And so throughout some legal battles and some legal struggles that he went through, he finally sold his estimated $50 million house for $8.5 million. That's a tough day, right? For most of us. I just had to sell it for $8.5 million. But still, you know what he told the judge? I still don't have enough money to pay the fines for all the legal trouble that I've gotten into. Because why? He didn't count the cost before he went to go ahead and build this house. The question for us that we want to ask is this. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? H.L. Hunt, he was one of the very first real millionaires from the late 1800s into the early 1900s. And he said 2 keys to success are this. Decide what you really want, and then decide what you're willing to pay for it. And so the question for us is this. Is what I'm going to do, is it really worth my time, my money? Is it worth my future? If what I'm about to do, is it worth it? You can go ahead and you can see in your notes there if you're just listening. We'll go through this really quickly. We don't have slides for this, but here are some ways, 4 questions to calculate the cost. The first question is this, the experience question. Based on my past, is this a wise decision? Based on my past, is this a wise decision for me? The second question we can ask about calculating the cost is the timing question. Based on my present circumstances, is it a wise decision right now? It's a timing thing. Maybe if it was in a different season of life or a different timing for it, but maybe the timing. Is this a good time for me to make this decision? The third question is the dream question. Based on my future hopes and dreams, if I make this decision right now, is it going to cut out from me, under me, my legs and cost me my future if I make this decision? And then my favorite one, the fourth way to calculate the cost is the punt question. You punt to somebody else. Ask somebody else, based on their experience, is this a wise decision? And just get some input, just like we talked about, getting advice. And we find then it takes us to our 5th step. You can see there in your notes. The 5th step for us is this, prepare for problems. Do we have problems? Yeah, we do. That's why there's chocolate cake and insurance. Why? Because there's problems. And sometimes for some people, just to handle their problems, they have to go ahead and indulge sometimes. In Proverbs 22, verse 3, we find this. Solomon says, a prudent man, again, a wise person, foresees the difficulties ahead and prepares for them. The simple person goes blindly on and suffers the consequences and thinks, well, somebody can bail me out and somebody can help me get through this. You have family members or friends who kind of do this. They make a decision and then they think, well, my family member, which is you or me, they'll bail me out, right? They'll kind of pick up the slack. And we get flustered and frustrated sometimes. But he says there, prepare. I want you to go ahead and circle that word for us. One of the challenges so many times for us is this. There's a scriptural principle of waiting on the Lord. And sometimes what happens is this, we get preparation, we're preparing confused with waiting. Just because God says over and over, wait on me, wait on me, wait on me, trust me, wait on me. There's a big difference though, because I think for some of us, we confuse waiting for preparing. Waiting is this sense of very passive, just kind of, hey, I'm waiting for my ship to come in. Hey, I'm just waiting for my big chance. Hey, I'm waiting for things to change for me. I'm waiting for things to get back on track. And yet here's the reality. For some of you that are listening today, some in here, some of you watching online, when COVID and all these things are behind us and we tell some stories, here's the reality for you, is you've been waiting to get back to normal, but you've not been preparing to get back to normal. And in this process, if you're not careful, you're going to get caught up and you're going to get tripped up and frustrated because you have expectations that are not going to be met because life has changed. Life is not going to go back to normal. There is a new normal. As much as you and I hate to hear that term, new normal, we hear it so much, an unprecedented and new normal. We need to go ahead and erase those from our vocabulary. But for us, to understand, we need to be preparing, not just waiting around passively, but preparing for what's to come. The question for us to ask is this. There's two actually for this one. The first one is this. What could go wrong? And what will happen if it does? We've got to be careful here. We talked about this a little bit last week. We've got to gauge our emotions a little bit. We can't go around and worry. And that there's a demon behind every bush, and that bad things are going to happen, and so we got to, there's rain clouds, and it's Murphy's Law, and I heard of a guy who put a bumper sticker on his car one time and said, Murphy's an optimist. That's how bad this guy's life was. And so we have to ask ourselves, what could go wrong? And if it does go wrong, well, how will I respond? How will I work through it? How will I get through it? We have to know the difference in preparing for those problems and solving those problems. And realizing that it's okay to say, when we're not prepared for something, when we're struggling to make a decision and somebody pressures us, if you're not prepared to make that decision, it's okay to say, hey, can you give me some time? Can I get back to you? And not feel the pressure to go ahead and to make a snap decision right in the moment. Number 6 then. The 6th step for us to take is this, as we wrap up. The fear is going to be the big selling point for us when it comes to making decisions, whether we do it or not. And so step 6 is this, to face our fears. The ability for us to move forward and make a decision is going to be to face our fears. To be able to get unstuck and to say, okay, I'm not going to live in the past, but I'm going to move forward with God's help. I'm going to have to face some things that are going to stretch me. They're going to be a little bit uncomfortable. Fear is at the root of all decision making. And fear creates indecision. It causes us to wonder, oh, I don't know, what should I do? Skittles or M&Ms? You ever had that happen? You went and grabbed a handful of Skittles and it turned out to be M&Ms. What a surprise, right? Or maybe you're making something and you put in too much of some ingredient because, well, salt and flour and baking soda and baking powder, it's all kind of looks the same, right? But if you put too much of one thing or the other in, it'll mess everything up. And so we find ourselves indecision. Ecclesiastes 11 verse 4. If you wait for perfect conditions, you'll never get anything done. If we wait until everything is just right, the challenge for us is this: we overthink everything. What if? And the opportunity to break free from overthinking isn't to stop thinking. I just need to not think about it. I just need to stop thinking about it and just distract myself. Distraction's not the answer to overthinking. Action. You say, well, how do I know? What should I do? What if I make the wrong decision? Go back to step 1 and work our way through each one of those steps. Pray for guidance. Pray for guidance from God. Get the facts. Ask for advice. And go through those steps. Perfectionism paralyzes the potential. Any potential that we ever want to have, if we're waiting for perfect conditions, it's going to paralyze us. God has always used imperfect people in imperfect situations to get his will done. Think about it. Noah, had he ever built a boat before? Nope. Had Gideon ever led an army? No. Had Esther ever gone before a king before? Was she ever in a position of geopolitical royalty? No. So many people, as you look at their stories throughout the Bible, so many people were not prepared necessarily. They were not professionals, if you will. And yet God used imperfect people in imperfect situations to get his will done. Faith, then, is the antidote to fear. How do we face our fear? To trust God that even if things don't work out as I hope or plan, that I trust God that it's going to be his will that's going to be done. I'm going to trust God to care for me. And so much of the last year or so, there's been so much fear. There's been so much massive fear that has settled into our hearts. And my prayer for us is that we pivot on these moments and pivot on these opportunities of fear to move forward. Faith is the antidote to fear. How so? Romans 8:31. Great verse. Verse you can take with you this week, memorize even. And I'd encourage you to memorize this. Real simple verse. If God is for us, who can be against us? It's this question with this great answer. If God is for us, then who can be against us? And what's the answer? Who can be against us? Nobody. Why? Because our God is bigger than all of the problems or challenges we might face. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is this: what fear am I refusing to face? What fear am I refusing to face? And whatever that fear is, your ability to move forward is going to be on the other side of that obstacle. And so you say, am I hindering or helping God's plan to be lived out in my life? The way to get over that obstacle, that hindrance, to turn that obstacle into an opportunity, to turn that adversity into an advantage, is to find out and identify whatever that fear is and say, God helping me, I want to take a step of faith to trust God. We've got some great advice for us from that great theologian by the name of Dr. Seuss. As we come down the home stretch this morning, I want to hear from Dr. Seuss and what he says about this issue of decisions and being indecisive. He wrote this little poem for us called The Zode in the Road. Listen in. Did I ever tell you about the young Zode who came to two signs at the fork in the road? One said to place one and the other place two. So the Zode had to make up his mind what to do. Well, the Zode scratched his head and his chin and his pants. And he said to himself, well, I'll be taking a chance. If I go to place one, now that place may be too hot. And so how do I know if I'll like it or not? On the other hand, though, I'll be sort of a fool if I go to place two and find it too cool. In that case, I may catch a chill and turn blue. So maybe place one is the best, not place two. But then again, what if place one is too high? I may catch a terrible earache and die. So place two may be best. But on the other hand, though, what might happen to me if place two is, well, it's too low? I might get some very strange pain in my toe. So place one may be the best. And then he started to go. Then he stopped and he said, on the other hand, though. On the other hand, well, on the other hand, though. And for 36 hours and a half, that poor Zode made starts and made stops. Where? At the fork in the road. Saying, don't take a chance. No, you may not be right. Then he got an idea that was wonderfully bright. Play safe, cried the Zode. I'll play safe. I'm no dunce. I'll simply start out for both places at once. And that's how the Zode, who would not take a chance, got no place at all with a split in his pants. You ever feel like that? You're kind of stuck. You find yourself trying to go two places at once. And James says this, that a double-minded person is unstable. Why? Because indecision, it's just the fruit of the root of fear in our lives and causes us what? Have split pants sometimes. Do something great with your life for Jesus Christ. Don't just simply exist. Don't just simply wake up in the morning and hit your alarm clock, go through your day, come home, binge watch some television, go through social media, go to bed, just to repeat it over and over again. Make a decision that determines your destiny and makes your life matter for eternity. There are 4 basic life decisions. We've talked about this for Greater Philly Church. My prayer for you as your pastor, as your coach, as your spiritual coach, as your friend is this: that you make these 4 decisions, that you don't have to go ahead and wrestle through even those 6 steps, because we see throughout the scriptures that these 4 basic life decisions, God says, this is my plan and purpose, my dream for you. And so the first decision is this: a decision to belong. Commit to Christ and to a church family. Commit to Jesus Christ and a church family. And maybe for some of you, even those of you who are watching online and at home, maybe for you the decision is, you know what? I want to be more intentional and more purpose to engage at Greater Philly. Maybe it's coming out to church. Maybe it's to be more intentional online, commenting in the comments section, to take opportunities to put myself out there just a little bit and show that I'm a part of something bigger than myself. There is stability when we come together and worship God with one another, as we take our worries and set them aside and replace them with worship. The second decision is this. The second basic life decision is decision to grow and get beyond where I am. Commit to the habits necessary for spiritual growth. Prayer, Bible study, giving back to God, and spending time in a small group with other believers. Our small group for us, for me personally, has been a massive help getting through these last 15 months or so, getting through COVID, as we've taken time. We took some time off when things were really heated and really difficult because of COVID. We weren't sure how things were, but then we decided to go ahead and we started meeting together and playing it safe and spending time together, encouraging each other. The third decision is this: a decision to serve. Commit to using my God-given gifts and abilities in serving God and others. We have soaked up and we have sat and we've had this last year to kind of play it safe and take it easy. And maybe for you, you say, I've got some pains and some difficulties and some grief that I'm going through because of missed opportunities and unmet expectations. And the greatest way to leverage our pain and our grief is to use it for God's purpose, for His glory. So we can say, you know what, here's what I learned. And I can't wait till we can start meeting together again, having brunches and having picnics and doing gatherings, so we can say, well, what did you learn going through COVID? What were some lessons you learned? Things like, you know what, change out my mask every couple of days because it starts to smell after a little while, right? And things that God has taught us through this time. And we use those opportunities to serve other people. And then last of all is this: the decision to share. Commit to sharing Christ with other people. We commit to sharing Christ with other people. That is, we share our story. There are people, I'll just say this as a side note, this isn't in your notes, we don't have this on PowerPoint, but people are going to give you their knots. You need to look for the knots with people. And those knots are this: I'm not prepared for this. I'm not prepared for this. I'm not prepared for COVID. I'm not prepared to get back out of COVID. I'm not doing well. I'm not prepared. I'm not doing well. I'm not emotionally doing well. I'm not physically doing well. I'm not spiritually doing well. I'm just not doing well. Maybe for some people, I'm not from around here. If you meet people, there's people that are moving. And we've seen friends of ours that have moved even across the country. We've had people that have moved into this area and actually started checking out Greater Philly Church. When you hear somebody say, I'm not from this area, it's a great opportunity to listen up, to listen to that cue. I'm not prepared. I'm not doing well. I'm not from here. I'm not familiar with God. That's one of the most important knots to listen to. Somebody says, I'm just not too close to God right now. I'm not familiar with God. I'm not close with God right now. You listen to those knots. When you hear those knots, that's an opportunity for us to go ahead and say, you know what? Hey, can I extend to you an invitation to Greater Philly Church? We've got some invites that we made up. You can find them at our guest services. We've got a brand new series coming up, kicking off May 30th, and I'll talk about this a little more after the service, after the message. Winning with the hand you're dealt. We all have cards that we've been handed to in life. Those cards are this: that my chemistry, my consciousness, my connections, my circumstances, my choices. And with all those, we find this, that most of us like to talk about life, where we've been or where we're going, but rarely do we talk about what bothers us about our lives. Things like disappointment with ourselves, difficult relationships, discouraging situations, or even choices we regret. And we get it here at Greater Philly. We get that. Dealing with the hard, difficult hand you've been dealt is difficult. It's hard at times. But that's why we're here. We're here to help you figure out what to do with the cards you've been dealt and how to discover and uncover your purpose in your pain without losing your soul or sense of significance along the way. If you've come through this time and you felt any kind of loss, and you're talking to people who felt loss, this is a great opportunity. You say, what if people, how do I know who to hand it to? If somebody's doing great, if somebody attends another church, if somebody says like, hey, I'm doing wonderful, they're probably not going to receive this. They're probably not going to take it well. So my encouragement was this: I'm not doing well, I'm not prepared, I'm not from this area, or I'm not close to God right now. 4 nots to listen to for people. And that's a cue from them saying, hey, I could use some help right now. That's a great opportunity to pass this off. I'm excited because with this series, we're going to hear some testimonies from church members, people that you know who have gone through circumstances with cards they've been dealt, and they're leveraging those difficulties in their lives, and they're having success, spiritual success, and relational success, and opportunities put before them because they're taking difficult cards they've been dealt, and they're making the most of them in their life. The decision for us then, we talked about the integrity decision, and the conscience decision, and the legacy decision. And this week, with the question of this, the maturity question is, what is the wise choice, the wise decision to make? So the maturity decision is this. It's pretty simple. I will make the wise decision. My prayer for you today is this: when you are faced with a tough decision, that you take the guesswork and complexity out by going step by step and saying, I'm going to, with God's help, make a wise decision and not leave it up to chance or a gut feeling, but I'm going to make a wise decision with God's help today. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for your goodness to us. And God,